For this project, I have chosen to take a deeper look into some NCAA basketball data. Specifically, this data can be used to help make better educated bracket decisions for March Madness. This is, in essence, an attempt to make sense of the madness. For each of the past 4 seasons, I've been compiling data for each of the 300-plus Division I teams that are eligible for the tournament. The data that I will be displaying mostly filters down to the 64 teams in the tournament each year. I've been working on creating a metric that will help me decide which team to pick as the winner throughout each round of the tournament. This is the first time I've made an effort to compare the actual outcomes with my predicted results. First, I'll discuss one of the biggest factors in a team's potential tournament success, their seed. There are 4 regions in the bracket, and 64 teams are seeded 1 through 16 in each region. The 1 seeds are the strongest teams, and they pair off against the 16 seeds in the first round. By design, the better teams have an easier route through the tournament, so a better seeded team is expected to lead to a deeper run into the tournament. Here we see the teams that made it to the Final Four in each of the past 4 years. In 2015 through 2017, we see a clear concentration of the top seeds with the addition of 1 lower seeded team. 2014 was a bit of an unusual year because not only were 2 lower seeded teams in the Final Four, but UConn, a 7 seed, and Kentucky, an 8 seed, actually went to the championship. The main takeaway from this is that although the top seeds have a dominating presence at this depth of the tournament, it seems common for at least 1 lower seeded team to squeak its way to this distance of the tournament. If we filter to just the championship teams, we see that, with the exception of 2014, the championship game was played with only 1 and 2 seeded teams. Next, we'll look at ESPN's BPI metric. This BPI, or Basketball Power Index, was developed by ESPN to be a predictor of a team's performance. I've chosen to include BPI in this presentation because of ESPN's strong reputation in the sports industry. It makes for a decent reference point in determining the effectiveness of my efforts. Here we see the correlation between the BPI and the actual games won during the tournament. We have the actual number of games won along the x-axis, so teams that lost in the first round are all at 0 point, teams that lost in the second round are at 1, and so on until we see the champion team at the 6-win mark. And along the y-axis we have the BPI scores, so a higher BPI would be expected to correlate with more wins, so we'd expect to see the top teams in the upper right corner of the chart. In looking at 2014, as referenced earlier, this year seems to go against the odds. The result seems to be a bit of an anomaly. UConn, the champion, they didn't even have a BPI in the upper quartile, so the BPI doesn't appear to have a great accuracy here. In 2015, we see that Kentucky has, or was a team with the highest BPI, and they did in fact make it to the Final Four. Wisconsin and Duke, both with some of the highest BPIs, played for the championship, so these results reflect better on the BPI accuracy. In 2016, we see that North Carolina and Villanova, having 2 of the highest BPIs, are both playing for the championship, so again, this is a good result for BPI accuracy. Finally, in 2017, we see Gonzaga and North Carolina, with some of the highest BPIs, playing for the championship again. One noticeable result here is that Villanova had the highest BPI, and the highest BPI of all, and didn't make it out of the second round. One further note is that this past year, ESPN revised their BPI calculations, which is why the y-axis scale is different here in 2017 than on previous years. And now we'll look at my BDS metric, or bracket defining score. This is the number that I've been calculating to determine which team will win in any possible head-to-head tournament matchup to complete my brackets. I use a variety of variables, including seed, road game performance, since every tournament game is essentially a road game. Record against top 25 teams, record against teams ranked 25 to 50, record against teams ranked 51 to 100, record in their last 10 games, so that determines if they're on a hot streak or if they're falling apart as they approach the tournament, their BPI score, and the lines from Las Vegas odds makers. I've combined these variables, giving each a different weight in the overall calculation. And I typically use different weighting scenarios as I fill out multiple brackets, but this presentation is showing just one of my weighting scenarios. I realize that there's overlap in my variables, as people that determine the seeds are considering similar things that the BPI is considering, and that the odds makers are considering, etc. And also, just a note here, my data sources include CBS Sports, ESPN, NBC Sports, the NCAA, TeamRankings.com, and VegasInsider.com. And now we'll take a look at the correlation between the BDS score and actual tournament wins. In 2014, I had UConn edging into the upper quartile, but still not a team with a standout BDS, and the same for Kentucky. Florida and Wisconsin both had high BDS scores and were in the Final Four. In 2015, Kentucky, with the highest BDS score, they made it to the Final Four, and Wisconsin and Duke, with some of the highest BDS scores, were both in the championship game. Michigan State down here, however, did not seem to be scored quite high enough to be in the Final Four. In 2016, the top four BDS teams all made it to at least the Elite Eight, and Oklahoma and Villanova, there were two of those four teams. They continued on, and finally in 2017, Villanova threw off the BDS accuracy as it did for the BPI that year. But Gonzaga, with the highest BDS, played in the championship game against North Carolina, which had the sixth highest BDS score. So overall, the fairly similar accuracy results between the BPI and the BDS. But let's take a side-by-side comparison look at how the BPI and BDS correlations compare each year to get an idea of how my metric matches up with an industry leader's metric. In 2014, we know that UConn and Kentucky were a bit of an anomaly, but we see Florida and Wisconsin in the Final Four, and the BDS score shows them with a bit more clear separation from the pack than the BPI had showed. In 2015, the results, particularly for the Final Four teams, are quite similar. In 2016, it looks like I valued the champion, Villanova, down here, higher than the BPI had valued them, but I didn't quite get enough credit to Syracuse, and it looks like I over-credited Kansas here. And finally, in 2017, the BPI and the BDS are again fairly similar. My BDS seems to have better recognized the potential of runner-up Gonzaga, but undervalued the Final Four team, South Carolina. So overall, my BDS score is showing promise. Finally, just to take advantage of Tableau's capabilities, I decided to take a look to see if there are any geographic patterns in basketball successes. The main thing that stands out is North Carolina's dominance in most years. Again, 2014 is the exception to this data. With traditional powerhouses like Duke and UNC, along with other schools like Wake Forest and NC State, it makes sense that North Carolina would stand out, despite the fact that they are a smaller, less populated state than some others. The other thing that stands out is the consistent lack of tournament teams and wins in the Montana and Idaho region of the country. This isn't really a solid takeaway from this geographic analysis to determine wins, but it does suggest that if the matchup is a toss-up, then maybe picking the Carolina team might be a good tiebreaker, since history shows success and talent tends to follow historically successful programs. So, in conclusion, I have not yet cracked the code, and so the madness will continue, but my continued analysis and future tweaks to my calculations may help put me one step closer to the perfect bracket.